I found my father's secret room in our basement. What's inside will blow your mind. The house felt different after Dad's funeral. Not just quieter, though the absence of his morning news broadcasts and evening jazz records left an uncomfortable silence, but structurally different, as if the walls themselves were mourning. Mom had retreated to her sister's place in Portland, unable to bear the memories that clung to every corner of our family home like smoke. I'd volunteered to sort through Dad's belongings, a task I'd been dreading for weeks. At 32, I thought I knew everything about Robert Chen, my methodical, reserved father who'd worked as an accountant for 40 years and whose idea of rebellion was wearing mismatched socks on weekends. The basement had always been Dad's domain. Growing up, my sister and I were allowed down there only to retrieve Christmas decorations or summer sports equipment. Too much dangerous junk, he'd say, shooing us back upstairs. Now, standing at the top of those creaky wooden steps with a box of garbage bags and a heavy heart, I realized how little I'd actually explored the space where my father spent most of his free time. The main area was exactly what you'd expect. A workbench covered in neatly organized tools, shelves lined with paint cans and cleaning supplies, boxes labeled in Dad's precise handwriting. But as I worked my way through decades of accumulated possessions, I noticed something odd about the dimensions. The basement felt smaller than it should be. I'd helped Dad measure this space years ago when he was considering adding a rec room. The dimensions we'd calculated didn't match what I was seeing. There should have been at least 8 more feet extending toward the back of the house. Running my hands along the far wall, I discovered what felt like a seam in the paneling. A thin vertical line, barely visible, ran from floor to ceiling. My fingers found a small depression, and when I pressed it, a section of the wall clicked inward. My father had a hidden room. The space behind the false wall was small, maybe 6 by 10 feet, but meticulously organized. A single desk lamp cast warm light over a scene that made my knees weak. The walls were covered with photographs, documents, newspaper clippings, and what looked like surveillance notes. At first glance, it resembled a detective's investigation board from a crime drama. But these weren't random cases. Every single item related to missing children. Dozens of them. Photos of smiling kids from school portraits, candid shots that looked like they'd been taken from a distance, maps with locations marked in red ink, and detailed timelines written in my father's familiar script. My hands trembled as I picked up one of the files from the desk. Sarah Martinez, age 7, disappeared June 15, 2003, near Riverside Elementary. Last seen, 3:47 p.m. boarding ice cream truck. License plate 4HG892. The file contained everything. Police reports. How had he gotten these? Witness statements, even what appeared to be traffic camera footage printed on regular paper. But most disturbing were the personal details. Sarah's favorite color, her fear of thunderstorms, the birthmark on her left ankle. I sank into the chair, my father's chair, and tried to process what I was seeing. File after file of missing children, some dating back over 20 years. Each case meticulously researched, cross-referenced, and annotated with insights that seemed to go far beyond what any civilian should know. Then I found the other drawer. Inside were different kinds of photographs. These showed children who were clearly alive and well, playing in backyards, walking to school, laughing with friends. But red X's had been drawn through many of their faces, and dates were written in margins. Dates that corresponded to when these children had gone missing. My stomach lurched. Was my quiet, gentle father some kind of predator? Had I been living with a monster for 32 years? But as I forced myself to look closer, other details emerged. At the bottom of each recovered photo was a small notation: safe. Family reunited 8/23/04, or found. Suspect in custody 11/17/06. The red X's weren't marking victims, they were marking cases closed. In the very back of the room, I discovered a small safe. The combination was my sister's birthday, and inside I found something that changed everything. A letter addressed to me, dated just 3 months before Dad's heart attack. Dear Michael, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you found my work. I know how this must look, and I'm sorry you had to discover it this way. I'd hoped to have more time to explain. 23 years ago, your cousin Emma disappeared. She was only 6, taken from a playground while your Aunt Helen's back was turned for just a moment. The police did everything they could, but after 6 months, the case went cold. Helen never recovered from the guilt. You remember how she was after, broken, hollow, always staring at empty doorways as if Emma might walk through them. I couldn't stand watching our family suffer that way. So I started digging. I learned everything I could about child abduction cases, studied patterns, developed contacts in law enforcement, and spent every evening down here working cases that the system had given up on. It started with Emma. I never found her son. That failure haunts me still. But while searching for her, I stumbled across leads in other cases. I found connections that overworked detectives had missed, spotted patterns that departments in different jurisdictions hadn't shared with each other. Over the years, I've helped locate 47 missing children. I've provided evidence that led to the conviction of 12 predators. I've reunited families and given parents their lives back. I never took credit because that wasn't the point. The point was making sure no other family had to endure what we did. I know this looks obsessive, maybe even unhealthy. Your mother thought I was having a midlife crisis when I started spending so much time in the basement. I let her think that because the truth would have worried her too much. But this wasn't a hobby or an obsession. It was a calling. The children whose photos you see weren't victims of my interest. They were saved by it. Each red X represents a life restored, a family made whole. The surveillance photos were taken only to establish patterns and identify potential predators. Everything I did was in service of bringing these kids home. There are 3 active cases on the desk. I was close to breakthroughs in all of them. If you choose to continue this work, Detective Martinez at the 15th Precinct knows about my consulting. She's been my unofficial contact for years. If you choose to walk away, please at least give her the files. I'm proud of the man you've become, Michael. You have your mother's compassion and your old man's stubborn streak. Whatever you decide to do with this room, know that I love you. Dad, P.S. Check the small box on the second shelf. Those are the thank you letters from families. I kept them to remember why this work mattered when the cases got too dark. The box contained dozens of letters, cards, and photos. Families posing with children who might never have come home without my father's silent intervention. Wedding invitations from kids who'd grown up to get married. Graduation announcements. Birth announcements from those who'd become parents themselves. One letter from the parents of a boy named Tommy Chen, no relation despite the name, was particularly striking. Mr. Chen, we know you prefer to remain anonymous, but we had to write this. Tommy has been home for 3 months now, and he's healing. He asks about the quiet man who found him every day. We tell him that some people are angels who work in secret. We hope someday we can thank you properly for giving us our son back. I sat in that hidden room until sunrise, reading through cases and correspondence, slowly understanding that my methodical, reserved father had been living a double life, not as a criminal, but as an anonymous guardian angel. The 3 active cases were heartbreaking. 8-year-old Marcus Williams had been missing for 6 weeks. Dad had traced his likely captor to 3 possible locations and was planning surveillance when his heart attack struck. 11-year-old twins Jenny and Jake Morrison had vanished from a mall food court. Dad's notes suggested they were being moved along a trafficking route he'd been tracking for months. I thought about my own son, David, who was 7. I imagined the agony of not knowing where he was, whether he was safe, whether he was alive. I thought about the parents of Marcus and the Morrison twins, lying awake every night praying for their children's return. By Monday morning, I'd made my decision. I called Detective Martinez and arranged to meet. She was a tough woman in her 50s who'd seen too much, but when I mentioned my father's name, her entire demeanor softened. "Your dad was a godsend," she said. "Saved my department from looking incompetent more times than I can count. He had instincts we couldn't afford and patience we didn't have time for. I'm sorry for your loss, but I'm grateful you found his work." Together, we reviewed the active cases. Within 2 weeks, Marcus Williams was home. The twins took longer, 3 months of careful investigation, but they were eventually rescued from a trafficking ring that Dad had been tracking across 4 states. I kept my accounting job, but I also kept my father's secret room. I modernized the equipment, learned digital surveillance techniques, and established secure communication channels with law enforcement contacts Dad had developed over the years. I told my wife Sarah about my consulting work, though I downplayed the emotional toll. In the past 2 years, I've helped locate 11 missing children. It's not as many as Dad managed, but I'm still learning. Each case teaches me something new about perseverance, about hope, about the lengths we'll go to protect the innocent. The work changes you. You see the worst of humanity regularly: the predators, the traffickers, the people who view children as commodities. But you also see the best, the parents who never give up hope, the communities that rally around missing families, the law enforcement officers who work tirelessly despite overwhelming caseloads. Sometimes, in the quiet hours down in Dad's room, I feel his presence. Not in any supernatural sense, but in the methodical organization of the files, in the careful attention to detail that increases the chances of bringing someone home. I understand now why he spent his evenings down here instead of watching TV with Mom. This wasn't a hobby, it was a mission. Last month, I received a letter that made everything clear. It was from Emma's mother, my Aunt Helen, who's now in her 70s and living in a care facility. "Michael," she wrote, "I heard about your father's secret work from your mother. I need you to know that I figured it out years ago. Robert thought he was protecting me by not talking about Emma's case, but I could see it in his eyes every time we were together. He was still looking for her. He never found Emma, and she may never be found. But knowing that someone loved her enough to never stop searching, that gave me peace. Your father gave me the strength to keep living. Please don't stop what he started. The basement doesn't feel different anymore. It feels purposeful, alive, with mission and meaning. I've learned that heroism doesn't always wear a cape or carry a badge. Sometimes it wears reading glasses and keeps meticulous files in a hidden room, working case by case to repair the small corners of a broken world. Every child brought home safely is a victory against despair. Every predator caught is a step toward justice. Every family reunited is proof that love and determination can overcome even the darkest circumstances. I understand now why Dad never talked about his work. It wasn't about recognition or gratitude, though the thank you letters sustained him through the difficult cases. It was about the quiet satisfaction of knowing that somewhere a child was safe because he'd refused to give up. The secret room in our basement wasn't hiding something shameful. It was protecting something sacred: the belief that every missing child deserves someone who will never stop looking, never stop caring, never stop fighting to bring them home. And now, that someone is me.